after going through that experience, I am so much more careful about asking people about children. Like somebody gets married, oh, are you guys planning on having kids? And on the
Yes.
back end, you have no idea what they're going through.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Defense Never Rest. I am your host, Trisha Baxter, and today we're talking infertility, a tough topic, but I think so important to talk about. Joining me again is Talar. Hey, Talar, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I love you. You know that, right? You're my favorite co-host.
You know what? It never gets old hearing it. So you can keep telling me over and over and over again. And it is my birthday today. So it's
Happy
a very special
birthday.
day. Thank you. Thank you. I wouldn't be here without it.
Right?
Yeah, it's a big
That's why we
deal.
celebrate. That's why we
It's a
celebrate.
big deal. But let's talk infertility.
Yeah,
I mean, that dovetails really well, right? Infertility, birthday.
Yeah, you planned that out, didn't you?
I didn't, but
Yeah. Right.
let's proceed.
So yeah, we decided to do this episode. It was actually brought to my attention by one of the as a possible topic by one of the guests today. So let's talk about the two guests. First is Jackie Harounian. She's a family law lawyer. She really reached out and said, "Look, the infertility issue is really a hot topic in the legal world. That she's seeing such an uptick in." And such a growth in the industry that she was like, you should do a podcast on it. I said, that's a fantastic idea. Not to mention, I think everybody knows people that have gone through it for various reasons. So, and I think there's still a stigma to it. So to talk about it, I think is really exceptional. Our second guest is coming back for a second time, Sherry Belitz. She was here before as more of a jury consultant talking about nuclear verdicts and social inflation, and she has a wealth of knowledge. She started her own business in that area during COVID. But she has a personal story. She herself has gone through infertility. So when we decided to do an infertility journey, when we decided to do the episode, it was just natural for me to say, hey, Sherry, you're so open about it. Why don't you come on and talk about it? And she didn't even hesitate. So that's what today's episode is about. So let's bring them on. So our first guest is Jackie Harounian. Welcome, Jackie. I'm so excited for you to be here today.
I am also excited. This is going to be a great topic. Thanks for inviting me.
I love it. I love it. And back again the second time. I love her so much. Sherry Belitz. Welcome, Sherry.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. You will not be hearing about nuclear verdicts. I might give the definition by accident when you ask me for another definition, but that's just kind of so ingrained. So great to be back. Thanks for having
I'm sure that's
me.
what you do in your coffee talk in your happy hours. You accidentally spill out the definition of nuclear verdicts.
Constantly.
So let's start with some background. Jackie, tell us a little bit about what you do and what your passion is.
So I'm a family law attorney. I practice in New York. I'm a partner in a firm, and I actually started practicing family law straight out of law school. It's always been very relatable to me because I was a mom already when I started law school. I married young. I'm, believe it or not, still married. And I have seen so many changes in family law, in families since I started over 2 decades ago. And one of the new frontiers in family law is fertility law, surrogacy law, really non-traditional families doing non-traditional parenting and bringing their families and growing their families into the world in very different ways. And a lot of it has to do with advances in medicine, advances in technology, and a lot of disappearing stigmas having to do with infertility, same-sex marriages, hiring a surrogate, things that would have been very shameful and hidden even as recently as 5 years ago are now suddenly out of the closet, so to speak. And we are living in a time where people are much more open about their challenges, which I think is wonderful, because I think 10 years ago, infertility in a couple might have been something that actually broke apart a marriage. It is a very stressful experience, and I'm sure we'll hear about that today. All of the stresses, physically, emotionally, stresses to the relationship. But because it's been destigmatized, because there are so many new forms of advanced reproductive technologies, that now there are options available, and it's just easier for couples to deal with. And I don't know that we're seeing more infertility. I do think we're seeing older moms, and infertility sort of tracks the age of the mom, and in some cases, the age of the dad. We are seeing career women that are delaying childbirth. And now we're seeing same-sex couples and single parents that are using all of these new options to create families in their own way. I've really had a front row seat to all of this, and I really think it's amazing to have gender neutral laws and opportunities for people to really put together the type of adult family life that they want to have.
I love all that. I mean, like, there's so much in there to unpack that we will unpack. Before we get to the unpacking of that, Sherry, tell us about your background and your story.
Okay, sure. And it would be a lot easier to talk about nuclear verdicts, but I wanted to come on here and talk about my truth. And I was inspired from some recent posts lately and just some conversations that I've been having with people in a networking group. And it's a problem. I think Jackie summed up everything really well. And this is a problem that so many people grapple with, and it really is a silent stigma to it. And as Jackie pointed out, I think it's something that's getting a lot less stigmatized, perhaps as science progresses, as technology progresses, as we're really sharing our stories more over social media. So my professional background, for those of you who've met me on The Defense Never Rests before, is I'm a trial consultant. I am a lawyer by trade, practiced for many years, both at a firm and in-house, went back to school to study psychology, and I'm thrilled to be doing my passion, which is the intersection of law and psychology. But kind of the flip side to that, the flip side to all of that schooling and all of that career that preceded me having children was I waited a very long time. I was married very early, in my late 20s, which is kind of unusual these days. But my husband and I waited a very long time to have children. I was 35, and I found myself on the wrong side of statistics and battled this for 3 years, progressing treatments from everything from Clomid to IUIs to then multiple rounds of IVF, 10 reproductive surgeries in between, and 5 pregnancy losses.
Wow.
And I will say, and just because I'm at my bookshelf, I do have beautiful twins. There's a little glare on this, that were conceived through IVF almost 10 years ago. Actually almost 11 years ago. It's going to be their 10th birthday. So, and not everyone has the same resolution. And as Jackie said, there's so many avenues and there's so many ways to build a family. And that's kind of the journey that I realized. And we looked at everything, at donor eggs, at surrogacy, at adoption. We were in the process of an adoption. And someone said to me, because I'll talk a little bit about this, but people who you think will be the most support often are not, and they don't know what to do. It's their limitations. It's not that they are insensitive, terrible people, but they're limited in their understanding and in their worldviews. And then you sometimes just get support from places that you would never imagine. And I had support from a near stranger, and one of the things that she said to me that resonated is, there's so many ways to build a family. And that was kind of my mantra that kept me going all of those years.
That's an amazing story. And I think the fact that you're here sharing it is so compelling and so important. There's probably so many women that can relate. I know that 2 of my best friends kind of went through very similar experience. One was, I think, a 3 or 4 year journey. One was a 6 or 8 year journey. One involved them on the adoption process, where they're sitting in their lawyer's office with the pregnant mom and I don't know if she was pregnant or had a kid or whatever, but in the other office, are ready to take this child home, and it backed out, like right that in the lawyer's office, and the pure emotional hell that involved it. I just was amazed by her strength to go through it, whether it's the hormones, how it affects your body, you know, the relationship issues, because it was such a long journey. And when she finally told me she was pregnant, she had twins too, I think I did cry, because I was like, I knew how hard it was for her. So I think there's so many women that have that. So let's talk about the umbrella of infertility when you guys have talked about it a little bit, because it's not just IUF or IVF. I don't know if I'm getting the right terms.
Yeah.
What are we talking about when we're talking about infertility?
Okay, so I'll just take this one from sort of a personal perspective, having gone through just about every treatment. So I was 35 at the time, and what the traditional protocol is, I think it still probably is, when you're 35, you kind of give it 6 months to see if it happens on its own. Obviously, this is different if you're in a same-sex relationship or if you're want to be a single parent by choice. But if you're sort of in that traditional male-female relationship, you give it 6 months to see. If you're under 35, I believe it's a year. So I was sort of at that 35 mark line, and you kind of you start easy. You start with testing and seeing if it's a little bit like lawyering. You're kind of dissecting, like, okay, like eliminating, is this wrong, is that wrong, let's get him tested with these 3 tests, let's get you tested with these tests. And everything came out looking fine. So you start something called Clomid, the Clomid Challenge, which is kind of like your basic gateway fertility drug, makes you a little bit crazy, but and does make you ovulate a little bit more. But so that's kind of your gateway. Then you move into, and I should point out, and Jackie would be an excellent source to talk about this, is a lot of insurance policies have different caveats, like you must do this before you're eligible to do that. And the policies don't always reconcile with your health and the science. Like maybe X wouldn't be a good treatment for what you have, but your insurance is making you take that step. So anyway, the next step, and I should say, I am very blessed. I had excellent insurance coverage, and that was really eased any kind of financial burden. So that's huge because it is extremely expensive. So then you move on to IUI, which is intrauterine insemination, fondly known as the turkey baster, as we like to kid about it. I do have some good fertility humor because after a couple years hanging around there, you kind of you get it.
You gotta do some humor, right? You gotta make it easy.
I was pushing my twins down the street. I live right near my fertility clinic in New York. Shout out Cornell. But I was pushing my twins down the street when they were infants, and I saw the doctor that did my transfer, which I'll tell you about. And he kept looking at me, and I said, "Don't recognize me with my pants on." So yeah, just a little humor to get through the day. But okay, so we move to IUI, turkey baster. Everything is timed. You're getting constant hormone tests. It's 6 a.m. There are very early morning appointments. You see a bunch of women in suits and with their Blackberries at the time, and everyone's just waiting to get their blood work, 6 a.m, rushing off to work. So anyway, I was like, how could this not work? This is, they're timing it, they're putting everything where it needs to be, they're monitoring it. Like, how could this not work? So 4 times later, it didn't work. So then you move on to IVF, and IVF is another job. It is so many shots a day, all different kinds of protocols, depending upon your age, depending upon your issue or can't figure out your issue. And it's really, again, it's like a very hit or miss. So the first time is kind of done just very tentatively and not a lot of hormones, but kind of enough. So I did my first IVF cycle. It was an absolutely perfect cycle. I have to say, and this is kind of the stress of it, and actually has some parallels with the pandemic, I think. It really has some parallels with just not knowing what tomorrow will bring and just all of the uncertainty. Like if someone told me I was going to have these twins and they'd be celebrating their 10th birthday, I'd be like, okay, give me a couple more shots, whatever. I'll go like sit in this office and play on my BlackBerry in the morning. But having no idea, and we can all relate to that, living through a health crisis, having no idea is the frightening thing. So I had this perfect IVF cycle, beautiful 8-celled embryos, just perfection. I was like a star. Like the nurses were like, you're like 35, you're a spring chicken, like you're doing so well. Like, look at these eggs and these embryos, and you're just like, we love you for our statistics. You're going to be great. So anyway, I had, you have a retrieval. I'll just take you through the process. They extract eggs. You're under like a local anesthesia, which is really quite pleasant. After doing it a number of times, I really started to enjoy it. But no, I have to say it's the propanol. So anyway, they extract, they take the eggs, sperm, mix them together, and you have embryos. And I had 5 perfect embryos that first time. Then you have a discussion with your doctor. How many am I going to transfer? And she suggested I transfer 2. And you are by no means, and so many people tell me when they see my kids, oh, it's so cool, you have twins, and look, you have a boy and a girl. But by no means is that the goal. The goal is actually one healthy child. It's very, very high risk, especially for someone in their mid to late 30s to be carrying twins. And that's a whole other podcast, Trisha. But so anyway, I had these perfect embryos. I had this wonderful transfer. And then about 7 to 10 weeks into this great pregnancy, I was in horrible pain. I was rushed to the hospital vomiting. They thought that I had a twisted ovary, which is one of the things Jackie can probably tell you about. You sign away, this is a risk you take. You can have torsion. So that's what they thought it was. It was just horrible pain. So I had a surgery. It turned out that it was an ovarian cyst that burst. It was something caused by the IVF. And I had to have surgery when I was pregnant, and I recovered with no painkillers. I didn't want to take anything. Went back 2 days later, and they said, you have no heartbeats. So this was traumatic. And then they also said, by the way, you have this fibroid tumor that has grown to 15 centimeters from the pregnancy, and we will not cycle you again until you have it taken out. So you need to get a DNC, which is a procedure to basically safely remove that unviable pregnancy. You need to schedule something to get this fibroid out, and then we'll look at you again and we'll cycle you. So I went home. I mean, I was destroyed, but after a couple of days, I made a spreadsheet. Go figure, I made a spreadsheet of all of the things that I had to do and all of the doctors I had to call and disability at work and insurance companies, and just kind of step by step. I got the DNC. fine, scheduled the surgery for the fibroid removal. And the surgeon said to me, before I remove this, I just want to check that there's no scarring from the D&C because you can't cycle if there's scarring, but don't worry, I'm sure you're fine. Anyway, he checked, there was severe scarring. I needed another procedure. He said I can do that when I do the removal. So I had everything done at once. I think this was July of 2009, and I was good to go again in a couple of months. And just after that, I had severe PTSD. I did not want to be in a hospital. I did not want to be in a medical center, but I was getting older. I needed to keep moving with the process, and I just kept moving with the process. And each time I would have a miscarriage, each time I IVF cycled over and over. And with each miscarriage, there was some kind of issue. And then I kind of put that lawyer brain, research brain on, and just went on a quest to find answers, to meet doctors, to consult. I consulted in Colorado. I'm from New York. I consulted with all the doctors in New York, in Colorado with a very renowned doctor, in Chicago, all over the place. But where I learned the most information was from the women that I met through a support group, because so many people had been through so many things. And so that's kind of my story up until a successful pregnancy, but that's kind of the background story.
That's amazing. I mean, I think people don't understand the emotional roller coaster that this journey takes you on, and how unique it is for each individual woman. There's not an infertility path isn't the same for everybody. So I appreciate you sharing that story. I think it's amazing. Sure. Jackie, what do you see? I know you see other things too, like surrogacy, right? What other things do you see in the infertility?
Just as a follow-up to what Shari said and what you just said, it's definitely painful for the woman, because obviously pregnancy, miscarriage, loss affects probably the woman more greatly, but it affects the relationship too. Men are affected too. Siblings, sometimes there's secondary infertility. So you can have a couple that has a very easy experience getting pregnant the first time, but then the second time there's secondary infertility. And anything that involves so much medical intervention, there are so many costs involved, emotional costs, financial costs. It causes immense stress on the whole family. Luckily, there are more and more laws coming out, including in New York, that require insurance companies to cover fertility treatments, not just for heterosexual couples, but also for same-sex couples. So that's a huge positive change that you're going to see nationally. There are going to be more and more states that cover this type of treatment. And you know what? It's good for business, because if you can help women, career women, high earners, have smoother work-life balance situations and growing their families, they're not going to leave the workforce. They're going to be able to continue. We all know that companies that have men and women at the top make more profits for their shareholders. So already we're seeing that high earners, CEO women, they're getting the top level care. Everything is covered. And even the cost of surrogacy probably will be covered. So surrogacy right now is only legal in 12 states, including New York. And there are lots of reasons why surrogacy is so fraught with issues legally. We all might remember the Baby M case. That was like back in the 1980s. In the 1980s, surrogacy, there were no laws regarding surrogacy. And we had this very famous case, remember, with Mary Jo Whitehead. She and her husband hired a surrogate, and then the surrogate changed her mind at the very last second. And what ended up happening is it was a national news story. People took all different positions regarding surrogacy, and it ended up making surrogacy banned for the next 40 years, basically. And now here we are, it's being passed basically in recognition of the fact that many couples, including gay couples, want different ways to bring children into the world. And now medicine and law have caught up to what's going on in society, including celebrity culture. There have been numerous celebrities this year that have hired surrogates. I think Kim Kardashian has had 2 children with surrogates. It has become completely okay to talk about it. It's become basically it's a little bit of a class issue too, because being able to hire a surrogate, a paid surrogate, is costly. And it's not for everyone to do. It's not something that the average person can afford to do. So it has become a little bit of a high class thing, for lack of a better term. So surrogacy does involve a legal contract. There's a surrogate's bill of rights in most states, including New York. In New York, the surrogate has to be at least 21 years old. She has to go through a medical and mental health screening. And there's something called a pre-birth order that has to be signed so that there is no backing out, so that things are done in a more regulated way, which I really think is good. It's good for the couple. It's good for the surrogate. Of course, she can be compensated. There are safeguards in place. And there are all kinds of other issues that are going to come down the horizon, including choosing your baby's sex, which is legal in the United States of America and a few other countries, not legal in other countries, which means we're going to probably see birth tourism or other things, because the United States is sort of in the vanguard regarding surrogacy. At the same time, international adoptions are really decreased in the United States right now. There is some domestic adoption going on. There are so many trends going on in our society. There are fewer unwed mothers. There are fewer teenage pregnancies. Everything is sort of shifting later and later. And because of the pandemic, we're going to see even more of that. A lot of relationships these days are just virtual. So there isn't a lot of sex going on at all. It's really just kind
And
of.
that's a shame.
We're talking before that how this is really all a little bit sci-fi, because you can order a baby now. That's really what this is coming down to.
Oh my God, that's
Are becoming
crazy.
like commodities. And surrogates, I hate to be, it's like renting a uterus. It's a transaction now. It's all, and it needs to be regulated. It's also possibly a money-making opportunity for women that are younger, that have an easy time with pregnancy. There are many women that enjoy being pregnant. I have 4 children. I enjoy being pregnant. I got pregnant easily each time I was able to work. And there are women that can actually have opportunities to make income or do good deeds for their own circle of people if they want to be compensated for it. So there are positives. There are definitely some potential dark sides to it that have to be washed, because you don't want a society where wealthy working women or couples can just order babies from poorer women who are likely to be exploited. And pregnancy takes a toll on the body. It takes a toll emotionally. Those things don't go away. Pregnancy complications, psychological issues, these all have to be part of it, which is why it's very good that insurance is part of the picture, medical insurance, mental health, professional treatment.
And I wanted to follow back up on that, because both you and Sherry have touched on the insurance situation. And I have so many questions, but this is the one from the first one I had, which is infertility a problem only able to be solved by rich people, rich white working women that have insurance?
Well, if it's a pre-existing condition, which hopefully will remain a pre-existing condition covered by insurance, then no, it's going to be covered for everybody. It's going to be covered by everybody. But everything having to do with parenting and marriage is becoming a class issue, because all of the trends are showing that wealthier, educated people are getting married. Not so wealthy, less educated people are cohabiting more. There are exceptions to every rule. Generally, wealthier, more educated people, not just white, but across the socioeconomic and racial and ethnic groups, they're delaying parenting. They're delaying marriage. They're freezing their eggs and having parenting more in their 30s and even 40s. In working class and lower socioeconomic groups, you're going to see much younger marriages. And in the South, and other parts of the country that are a little bit more traditional and religious, there are definitely lower ages of marriage, lower age regarding parenting, but even a higher rate of divorce.
So it's so fascinating to hear about the class issue going on and what you're seeing. Are you seeing a similar, like a racial inequality in the infertility market? Is it available more to white women than it is to Black women?
Well, the insurance coverage is universal, especially in New York, where, there's strong protections for insurance for pre-existing conditions, and infertility would definitely qualify. So the coverage is there. But in general, if I'm going to make some generalizations, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but in general, more educated, wealthier couples are going to choose marriage, whereas less educated, maybe minority groups, maybe lower income, are maybe going to cohabit. These are what the trends show. And there's different ages of parenting. Wealthier couples, women that are working and earning high incomes, tend to freeze their eggs and delay the IVF process into their 30s and 40s. You're not seeing that in lower socioeconomic and minority groups. It does correlate with education. It correlates with marriage, because in traditional communities, and I would include, in the South or in other groups, Orthodox Jewish groups or other groups that tend to prioritize marriage, you're going to see lower ages of marriage for the husband and the spouse, lower rates of education, and earlier parenting, more biological parenting, as opposed to using IVF. So there are a lot of trends and cross trends regarding marriage, regarding parenting. For me, IVF and, fertility law really means that there are opportunities at later ages for parents of both same-sex and heterosexual. And also it creates options for parents that are infertile. And so it's just more opportunities to use medicine and science to become a parent in different ways than existed before.
I was just going to comment on that. My observations, I'm living in Utah and I'm downtown in Salt Lake City, but outside of Salt Lake City, it's a very LDS Mormon population. And I'm old enough to be a grandmother here. And I just turned 46. And so, I take my kid to school or I take him to daycare and I'm looking around going, these mothers are young enough to be my daughters. So we have a very young parent population here, definitely. And so I can see how that would influence your feelings in terms of motherhood and, how long you're going to wait. Whereas in other parts of the country, maybe it's not that uncommon.
And I want to follow up on that, because is the infertility, do we call it a problem? I don't want to say it's a problem. I mean, I don't know, the infertility issue, is it only seen in older women? Is it because, do we see a rise in it? Or one, are we seeing a rise in the problem? Two, is it because women are having babies later? Is it the age thing?
I can answer that because I've had a lot of doctors talk to me, because I actually had what was diagnosed as unexplained infertility. Like there wasn't a reason. I mean, I did have a lot of other issues, but there wasn't really a reason they could pinpoint and they can treat. And they can tell, doctors can tell a lot of times it is an age thing. And it's just very deceptive, because we see Hollywood and we see people having, I mean, I was susceptible to this, like having babies so much older. I live in New York City. I mean, it is like we are all like grandma moms here. So it's just probably the opposite of Talar's experience. So you kind of see this, and it's funny because I'm a trial consultant and I study people and I study trends and I study worldviews and attitudes, but you can really see how it shapes how you see the world. I mean, this waiting room at the fertility clinic, I used to say they should do a reality show if it wasn't so damn sad there, but it was like investment bankers, lawyers, like everybody was close to 40. They would call me the spring chicken at 35. By the time I was finished there, I wasn't the spring chicken, I was the frequent flyer. But yeah, I mean, look, this was, 10 plus years ago. There was definitely more of a stigma. And I saw, this is like a real coincidence, but I saw a post late last night. It was a man from California. He posted, I don't know if you saw it. It was like just a really heartbreaking post about his experiences with infertility. And I was up late. And I said, I don't care how tired I am. I'm responding. I'm sending him a DM, and I'm going to like throw all the support. Like, I don't care. I'll stay up all night if he wants to chat about this. And we did chat for a long time online. And it's just, I know I'm a little off track here, but it's just, how to give that support after having been through something. And I feel the same way. I have friends who have cancer, someone who's gone through cancer, someone who's going through treatment. And sometimes they say to me, Shari, you're the only one that talks to me like I'm normal. And I think it really is just a result of like being through such a stressful, traumatic, long experience where I didn't think there was an end in sight, and I completely didn't answer whatever question you asked. But
That's okay.
that's,
We're lawyers. We don't answer questions really, but
oh yeah.
Can I lodge a retroactive objection?
she loves objecting on this podcast, by the way.
I just, whether it's the
Go-
answer or
go
the
for it.
question, I'll just object. But I won't strike the record. We'll keep Shari intact. But one of the things I realized, so I was a geriatric pregnancy at 37. I was 38 when I had my son. And I had all these friends much younger than me going through IVF and going through all these things. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've waited too long. It might not happen for me. And I think it was less than 3 weeks of getting off the pill, I was pregnant. And it was like, here we are. And this is what we've got. And then 5 weeks pregnant, I got rear-ended on the freeway. And I was mortified. I was so mortified because I was already high risk because I was geriatric. And now, there was this accident. And so I was so worried that, he wasn't going to be okay, but he was okay. Here's my little guy. He's a little older now, but yeah, he's okay. But what I was going to say is, after going through that experience, I am so much more careful about asking people about children, or do you plan to have any kids? And I'm an Armenian immigrant, and that's like a very normal question, including the question, why have you gained so much weight? Totally acceptable in that culture. And
before or after you're pregnant, you get to ask that question.
No, even before you're pregnant, it's like, you've gotten really fat. Okay, not cool. But it's also okay to say, why haven't you had kids yet? Or why haven't you had more kids? And I didn't necessarily ask questions that way, but it was common. Like, somebody gets married. Oh, are you guys planning on having kids? And on the back end, you have no idea what they're going through. And I don't know, Shari, if you're referring to are you talking about the post from the man? He got an invitation to a bar mitzvah, and he talks about, how sad it is that he doesn't have the child to celebrate and whatever. And it's all, the innocuous comments that somebody who hasn't been in that world takes for granted what it means to somebody else who has struggled. And my goodness. And before I had my son, I remember I would be bawling at church every time I saw a child. I wanted a baby so badly. My maternal instinct was just like effusing into the world everywhere.
Yeah.
But anyway, my point
That's
was
beautiful.
that, I'm sorry to all the women I ever asked, are you having children? I really, truly am. And for everybody who has suffered and gone through that. And Shari, my goodness, talk about persistent and resilient. You are one resilient mama.
Yeah.
You are.
I just feel like, people have said that, but I also look at, and this kind of goes back to the discussion that we were having where I totally didn't answer the question, but I think it's also, look, I was privileged. I had this excellent insurance coverage. I had better than excellent insurance coverage because my husband was working at Lehman Brothers at the time. It went bankrupt. It seemed like it was the worst thing in the world. They had the best coverage. He got picked up by another company. Then we had that fabulous coverage. Then we moved over to mine. So I was, so that was, that was taking one stress out of the equation. That was absolutely taking one stress out of the equation. Very supportive husband. I got hooked up with a couple of support groups, which were lifesavers. I am friends to this day with several of the women, and everyone has built their families in different ways, some easier, some more difficult, but everyone who has wanted a family in the last 10 years has built a family, and a lot of it thanks to technology and the law. Anyway, I was at this great place for 15 years, a lot of it during that ordeal, and I have to say I was very open. I'm very open, and I was very open, and
I'm shocked. I'm
people
shocked that you're open.
oh, but people just, I mean, when I came back after that first miscarriage, two guys that reported to me took me out for lunch and spilled their stories. And I mean, there were wonderful people, including my boss. And it was just a really, really, it was not ideal in that there were also people around the same age, like pregnancies here and there, baby showers in the office all the time. But it was a really supportive group of people, and it just helped me to, I think it kept me sane going to work.
Well, and let's talk about that, the openness, the stigma, because, and I'll tell you my brief journey, which was, I had a slight infertility journey, but was short and successful. You know, I met my husband later in life in my early 30s, and we didn't decide to have a baby till I was like 35. So we tried for the 6 months. It didn't work. So I immediately went to like, I'm not waiting. So we did the turkey baster method, and we went through that 3 or 4 times, and then it was successful, and we had my daughter, and that was the end of my journey. So I didn't have nearly what you did, Sherry, but I certainly had a little bit of the ups and downs. You know, we would go through a treatment, and then you would wait for the 2 to 3 weeks to see if you're pregnant, and you're on pins and needles. And then when I would get my period, I would bawl, like I would be like, but I wasn't open about it. Like, this is the first time I've actually said it in public, if you will, but my close friends knew, but work didn't know. Like I had that stigma. Like, one, why am I waiting so long in life to have a baby? Like, I had that stigma. And then I had I need help to have a baby. I'm a woman. You know, why isn't this coming naturally to me? Like, so let's talk about that stigma. You know, you had it in 2008 and 2009 and your journey after that, right? So
Right.
do you see it any different now? And I'll throw this to you, Jackie, as well, both of you. Is the stigma getting better? Are we talking about it more? Are women more open now? What's going on with that?
I think women attorneys, we're hard on each other. I think women in general, we judge each other. There's the whole thing of the stay-at-home mom versus the working mom. And I think it's very natural for women who work to feel like if their plumbing doesn't work exactly the right way, that it's their own fault and that they somehow contributed to it. The fact is, and this touches a little bit on your earlier question, a lot of very young women have infertility issues. A lot of them can get pregnant easily, but then they also miscarry very frequently. And it's a fact, because I actually went through this. I mentioned I had 4 children. I became a mom when I was 21. I had a fair amount of miscarriage in between each pregnancy. And a lot of times what women think is a late period is really an early miscarriage. It's just that it hasn't been proven as such in a doctor's office. And so infertility is extremely common. Miscarriage affects a lot of young women that want to be pregnant. It affects a lot of marriages because it's a loss and it's a pain to deal with a miscarriage that for a baby that's very desired and wanted. And this can happen to a 25-year-old. I think infertility for older couples with IVF and all of that it is harder to get pregnant when you're older. All of this pain and loss and shame affects individuals, and it affects couples, and it absolutely coming out of the closet. I think Chrissy Teigen announced her miscarriage. She broadcast it from the hospital, and she already had 2 children, and it was still tremendously painful for her. And she's a celebrity with all of the privilege that you could imagine. And so when you see people sharing stories like that, when working women can own up to the fact that they really do want to have it all, want to work, they want to be able to grow their families, and they're not going to feel ashamed of getting a little bit of extra help medically if it's available. I think it is going to reduce stigma in a very powerful way, and maybe unite all women, because we all have different challenges that we have, whether you stay at home or whether you're working. And certainly during the pandemic, a lot of women have lost their jobs. A lot of them are going through relationship problems. And it is a time where we're all sharing online. So this podcast is such a great thing to really unite all of these issues together. They are very universal. I really do think it transcends age and class and any type of grouping you could think of.
Sherry, what do you think about the stigma? You saw it in your groups and you saw it in the waiting rooms, I'm sure. How have you seen that changed, or have you seen that change?
I don't know if I've seen it change, but I can tell you what I learned from my perspective and just kind of gauging other perspectives of people. And when you talk to me about your story, Trisha, the first thing that I want to throw out is you were at a law firm then, correct?
Correct.
So I think there could be a difference right there. I was at a client side job. So there is probably, so first of all, as far as hours, as far as structure, we are talking very structure, very manageable, not a lot of travel, things like that. So first of all, that makes things a little easier. Also, it's not a lot of times when women are sort of getting towards that point in their career, whether it's partnership or equity partnership or whatever those big goals and milestones are, that is really intersecting with their infertility struggles. It is around that 35, 36-year-old mark. So those are important. We know as lawyers, we were already pushed back 3 years, stunted. And, so we're kind of a few years behind. So I think that and I know women in my group who they were partners or they were on the road to partnership. And that is like a whole different game than if you're sitting in the corporate office. I did not want to be the CEO. That was not my career aspiration. I was very happy with what I was doing. I actually wanted to do something with psychology later, so I knew that this wasn't the end all. So I think that career pressure was taken off me to be open, and I didn't have to worry about being penalized. But I've heard about women, whether lawyers, bankers, whatever high-powered kind of situation that they were in. So there's the career stigma, but for a lot of people, there's personal stigma. Some of it can be cultural. My people are very emotive. We are a very sharing culture. We wear it on our sleeves.
Well, what's your people? You got to define what your people are.
Okay, the Ashkenazic Jewish people, we share. Everyone knows. We are, Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David. We tell you what we're thinking. So funny. I had a paralegal who never met, and she never met anyone Jewish. She was from like Louisiana, like really, really remote area. And she said to me the first time she met me, she's like, I thought all Jewish women were like Joan Rivers. And she's like, are you like Joan Rivers? So, okay, so that's kind of, look, I'm stereotyping here. My family was very open. I'm very open. It is less stressful for me to be very open. I wear my heart on my sleeve. So, but as far as culture, and I will say this, and this is really interesting, and I think this is actually a beautiful thing, and this is a beautiful thing, kind of like a silver lining during this dark time, is I would sit in my fertility clinic and there were a disproportionate number of, you had a lot of Orthodox Jewish people, very, very young women. And then there were also a lot of people from the Middle East. People would come to New York to go to this clinic. And I struck up a conversation with one of the women. She was so young. She was in her 20s. And she explained to me that a lot of Orthodox men had there was like a genetic characteristic that many of them shared, and there's, you know, quite a few intermarriages and things like that, but there was a genetic characteristic that many of them shared. So they were there. She could have been fertile as who knows what. She's 20, like 1 years old, but she was there for male factor infertility. And actually, the men from the Middle East, also a lot of Muslim men from the Middle East, they share that same gene, or that same, I'm probably not saying right, genetic anomaly. So I thought, like, wow, here, like, we're like all just kind of coming together. And um, I just thought it was, there are a lot of class distinctions. I'm not going to lie. We talked about insurance coverage. We talked about things like privilege, but it is an equalizer in some respects. And I did meet a lot of people in my support group. And going back to stigma, a lot of it was there was cultural stigma with some people. There was just personality, like just more private personalities. There was work stigma. So stigma is kind of very broad, and I think it can be categorized really.
Well, let's talk about, like, what you just said triggered a question in my head that, you know, we think of fertility as only a female issue, but there is male infertility. So,
Mhm.
Jackie, I want to throw this to you. Do you see that in your practice, the male infertility, and what do you see culturally with that?
All right, my practice is in New York, so I'm right outside New York City and Manhattan. Very more upscale socioeconomics. We definitely see male infertility also as a factor. A lot of the reasons that Shari just mentioned, you're not really going to know the cause of a miscarriage unless you go to a doctor. At younger ages, couples don't tend to do that. At older ages, there is going to be an analysis of the genes and the mix of genes and whether that's causing basically a spontaneous abortion, which is what a miscarriage is. It's basically nature's way of making sure that an unhealthy baby doesn't make it to full term. You're not going to really have that information unless you have an IVF clinic involved or some sort of genetic counseling. Male infertility is definitely a factor. What happens is, in our society, women are blamed for having unsuccessful pregnancies. Women are blamed for not having successful marriages. It is considered the women's domain to care for their husbands and their children. And if they fail to do that and the marriage fails, it's seen as the woman's failure. And you see this much more in traditional communities, Muslim communities, Jewish communities. You're going to see more and more the onus of a failed relationship is on the woman. A failed pregnancy is on the women. If children don't turn out right, it's the woman's fault. It's the mother's fault. More and more, though, if you take a step back and look at secular marriages, secular communities, gender neutral laws, it is much more fair-minded and more open-minded, and you're going to see fathers take responsibility. You see an apportionment of responsibility or blame on both parents, everything having to do with the domestic sphere. It's not that the home, the domestic sphere is their domain. It's also the father's domain.
So would it be inappropriate for me to bring up The Handmaid's Tale? Because I feel like that is just so relevant to what we're talking about. Have both of you seen it or read the book? It was a book too, right?
Yeah, I read the book in college, which it was probably completely lost on me, but I know the premise, and I'd love to see the show.
I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with the show. It's
Have you
my
not-
favorite show on TV.
Have you not finished it?
Oh yeah, I watched it like 3 times through.
Oh, okay, good. Because I didn't want to give anything away. Do I need to like declare spoiler alert?
Yeah, declare us.
No, I read the book.
Well, no, I mean for the audience.
for-
Anybody in the
okay.
audience that wants to see it, I do not get a cut. I don't get any commission. I'm not a paid supporter of these people. But what I thought was interesting, man, I don't know if I should give this away. So something happens and it is unclear whether or not the fertility problem is the woman or the man. But in this Handmaid's Tale culture, it's automatically assumed that it's the woman's problem. And it may or may not be the woman's problem, and you'd have to watch the show to see it, because I just don't want to give it away. I
Correct.
just don't have the heart to do that.
Yeah, I think, but it's an interesting parallel, because that is, I think Jackie's point is so well taken, is that even in 2020, we still have these mindsets that, of the gender roles and how that plays into fertility. It's so, that show is very representative of that.
And, another illustration, I get all my, information from TV, because if it's on TV, then it's true, right?
Always. And
I mean-
internet, you can always believe what's on the internet too.
The interweb, absolutely. So another program that I watched that I really enjoyed, another way that Hollywood is depicting this issue, is Little Fires Everywhere. And it's, this young Black woman who needs money in order to finish college, and agrees to become surrogate for this couple, wealthy couple. I think they were biracial, I'm not sure. But then she has the baby, and it's unclear whether or not she wants to go through with providing the child to this couple. And I don't want to tell you, because I don't want to give it away. I'm going to become like the spoiler alert troll of social media. I don't want to give it away. But again, the socioeconomic issues, which, I mean, that's really sad to think of, if that's what's happening. That's how, you're getting surrogates, are the people that need the money, and the ones that are able to hire them are the ones that have the money. I mean, it's just reality. It's an unequal playing field. But if you take that away, then you take away the opportunity for surrogacy. So I don't know what my point was. Maybe I didn't
Right.
have one, but whatever. It's okay, right?
the
It's my birthday. It's my birthday.
The Handmaid's Tale is, oh. I was going to say, if you can hear me, The Handmaid's Tale is such a important thing for women to really take in and understand, because it so highly correlates with gender roles, with the pro-choice or pro-life issue.
It's disturbing. Like it's very disturbing, I think, to see. And, I started watching, well, we could really get political on this on this podcast, but I think I'll stay away from what I was just about to say. But let's move on to wrapping up the episode, which is, I'll throw this to you, Sherry, a couple questions for you.
Sure.
One is, you've had the benefit of time and hindsight. Is there things that you would say to people that are starting this journey that you would either tell them to avoid, or you would tell them to follow? What's some advice that you would give?
I have a couple of gems that I picked up along the way. And one of them was from a wonderful woman who I barely know. I have not spoken with her again. I was put in touch with her by someone. And one of the things that she said, and I think this really destigmatizes things, is she said, Sherry, health is not a meritocracy. And she went on to give examples. The marathon runner who drops dead from a heart attack at 35 years old, while there is like someone drinking and eating and 80 years old in terrible shape. Health is not a meritocracy. And I think that's something for really hard for high achieving professional women who have gone by the book and checked the boxes, that this is something you can't earn. You're not better if you earn it. You didn't try harder if you earn it. This is not a meritocracy. So that was one thing she told me. And it just kind of made a feeling of relief just wash over me, and just kind of take away any blame or any stigma to the extent that I felt it. That I think I really learned a great empathy from what happened those few years, and just transferred it to other parts of my life. And like Talar was saying at the beginning, she doesn't ask those questions like, oh, are you planning on having kids? Are you having kids? Like, now I'll even take that to a step. If I meet someone and they mention, oh, I'm from Missouri, I don't say, do your parents live there? I say, oh, do you still have family? Is there family there? Like, I'm really careful with my words, and I'm not going to say I don't slip up, but I'm really careful with my words to just be sensitive to other people. And I think I don't want to like tie it up with a bow and say, oh, this is like my gift from like going through hell for 3 years. But it really is something that I attribute to having gone through these struggles. I'm more empathetic. I'm more careful about what I say. I would never say to someone, like I was having this conversation with the gentleman last night, I'd never say, oh, keep going. Have you tried this and have you tried that? Because you know what? He knows and he's tried and he doesn't need medical advice from me. Sometimes I said, you know what? Call me whenever you want or just write to me and I'll just listen and just tell me what I need to do to support you. And sometimes that's all someone needs to hear.
I love that. I mean, I think there is something to be said about walking the walk and knowing, and when you come across people that are knee deep or neck deep in the struggles that you've already had, it's helpful that you've walked the walk. You can relate and you can really give them a shoulder and a sounding board, and they have somebody to go to that understands. There's something to be said about that. So thank you for sharing that. We do need to wrap up. I really appreciate both of you guys being so open and sharing your experiences personally, professionally. I think that's fantastic. Before we go, I'm going to throw it to you, Jackie, whose sound may or may not be working. If it's not working, I am going to do a shout out for you, but let's just see.
Thank
So
you.
Jackie, tell people where they can find you.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn. If you can spell my last name, you'll find me. I love to interact with other professionals and colleagues on LinkedIn. My firm's website is lawjaw.com, LAWJAW.com. And my phone number is 516-773-8300. I want to again thank you for this really timely conversation. As a family law attorney, I've been seeing every stigma turned on its head over the past few years, whether it's drug addiction, mental illness, or infertility, almost any issue you can imagine. And it's a really nice thing to talk about it and air it out. Thank you.
Yeah, I like the fact that we're talking about it. Certainly isn't necessarily the end all be all, but just to talk about it is something. So what about you, Sherry? Tell people where they can find you if they want to talk to you.
Okay, so you can always find me on LinkedIn. I always have that screen open, including now, Shari Belitz, SHARIBELITZ. I also have a website, www.sharibelitz.com, so you can reach me there. And if any of this resonates, if you have experienced anything that I've talked about or want to talk about, or you're going through it, please send me a DM. I will get back to you. We can talk, we can text, whatever you prefer, but you're not alone. So I just want to put that out there. So I want to just lend myself as an ear.
Well, ladies, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for listening. We really appreciate it. So make sure you stay tuned for the next episode of The Defense Never Rests. We will see you then.